So, ladies and gentlemen, today on Sports File, it's the fourth of an ongoing Sports File series into the greatest Montreal Canadiens playoff periods of all time. Now, we've talked a little bit about some of the key ones of the 70s and 80s. We talked about Game 2 of the quarterfinal game against Boston, Game 3, where Montreal scored 6 straight goals overall and 5 in the third period to win 7-5 over Boston and finish off the Bruins. But we're also going to talk today about another game in the 71 series. It's Game 7, second period, Montreal and Boston. Montreal and Chicago, excuse me. I got Boston on the mind because, that was a big year for Montreal. Now, Chicago that year was loaded with talent, led by Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita, and the former Montreal Canadien, Tony Esposito. Now, he took a 2-0 lead in the series. Montreal was not expected to come back, but he ended up tying it in Game 4. But unfortunately, in Game 5, the shit hit the fan for the Montreal Canadiens. Now, you can call it a coaching controversy or lack of respect. Head coach Al McNeil, a former Montreal Canadien and Toronto Maple Leaf marginal player who had no right to be head coach of the Montreal Canadiens before Bowman showed up, he decided to bench Henri Richard, who was an alternate captain to Jean Beliveau in the 71 playoffs, in Game 5. That game they lost 2-0, and after the contest, McNeil, thinking Richard wasn't going to say something, he asked him, what did you do that? No, it was just a play to get the players motivated. Richard basically took a complete freak. The pocket rocket had a little bit of temper. He was more intense than his brother, and he basically told the media, the word incompetent in French has different connotations in Quebec French and Acadian French, but in Acadian French the word incompetent means someone who doesn't deserve to be here running anything. He called him in French literally the worst coach I ever played for, and Henri Richard had played for some really marginal coaches through the years. Now, there was accusation of McNeil favoring English-speaking players, and it eventually turned the public against him. Now, following death threats, McNeil and his family were assigned bodyguards for the final home game in Montreal, which Montreal won. But, of course, it wasn't enough to save his job, and he was soon replaced by Scotty Bowman after the end of the season. But that sets it up for Game 7, ladies and gentlemen. And the biggest part of Game 7 was the second period. Chicago was dominating the game up until the midway point of the period. They were well ahead. O'Shea had scored a big goal to put Chicago up 2-0. And, Montreal was being held in check. Now, in the early 1990s, I was a reporter with the Campbellton Tribune in Campbellton, New Brunswick. Had an opportunity to meet Jacques Lemaire at a Canada-Russia hockey season series being hosted at Campbell Memorial Civic Center. And he asked him the big question. He said, what exactly happened in the second period? He said, Jeffrey, let me tell you a little story. I knew Tony was kind of weak over the shoulder, so I skated up the ice and I let a booming shot go, and a lot of people thought Tony was weak, but he said it worked for me in the past. Sure enough, he was almost in the Chicago zone, took a big slap shot, and that goal, which made it 2-1, broke the backs of Chicago. Later on, Richard scored to tie the game. They held it the rest of the way in the third period. Richard scored a goal past the hobbled Keith Magnuson, and they won it in probably the biggest upset in NHL history. Now, what was kind of bizarre on the Chicago side, after the loss, Bobby Hull and a few other players were crying to the media that head coach Billy Ray decided to use defensive forwards Lou Adgotti and Eric Nestorenko and Magnuson in key situations. There were several 4-on-4s during the game, which of course would benefit Bobby Hull and all the scores for the Montreal Canadiens. Now, was Chicago the better team that year? Yes, they were. Did Montreal deserve to beat Chicago? Well, for some people, no, because a lot of people believe Chicago had a better offense and the better goaltending, because Kenny Dryden, sure, he made a lot of saves, but he didn't have the experience of Esposito in key situations. How it came out, it became the most unpredicted Stanley Cup in history. When Montreal ended the playoffs in 1970, as you remember, didn't make the playoffs, had a lot of injuries. Serge Savard was hobbled. Jean Beliveau was on his last. Ferguson was going to retire. They had a lot of players on the team they hadn't decided upon, including Tardif and Réjean and Bobby Sheen and a few others. Phil Roberto. I think Montreal coming back from 2-0 probably is one of the most underrated comebacks of all time. We don't talk about it too much, but you got to understand, you're in Chicago with those hostile Chicago fans who basically Jacques Lemaire told me Chicago had the big walk up to the rink and back, or walk down. He would spit regularly on the players in that area as you come out, and said it was like a rainstorm. Lemaire said we had every confidence was going to win, but the way we won was kind of unique because in Chicago, with their strong offense, the Chicago rink benefited. Montreal took a lot of stupid penalties that game, but Chicago couldn't get rid of them on the power play. So, game 7, second period. Sometimes the greatest period of the Stanley Cup victory is not the third period or even overtime. But we're going to talk. We're going to talk more about that down the road. How certain key periods of play have nothing to do with anything but taking the needed period and winning it. And you'll see in future podcasts. Again, thanks everybody for support. We're reaching 89,000 page views. Please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. If you like it, tell your friends. And if you don't like it, as we say to Bayview Drive in Beresford, New Brunswick, don't tell anybody. And we hope that you can look at my archive. There's almost 500 podcasts I've done as an expansion of my old print columns for Brunswick News and the Raymond family, the Hamilton Tribune, and the Dave Cadogan owned Dalhousie News, which date back to the mid-1980s. It's my pleasure to talk a little bit of NHL history. NHL has lost its history because the NHL the last 10 years is more corporate, but the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, my God, what a great era for drama, for soap opera style results. And Chicago was snake bit in the 1960s and 70s. After winning the cup, they were always on the rough side of the ledger. So again, be safe, be careful, enjoy the expansion of the bubble in the Maritimes, hug your family, friends, and have a good day, and keep your stick on the ice. Bye.